with good spells of sunshine. Highest temperatures of 7 to 10 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Now, good news, there was a winner of the big cash machine rollover today. Nuala Black in Meath won €22,000 when she answered Barry's call. There is more up for grabs tomorrow. So the new figure for tomorrow is €10,406.57. To enter, simply text the word play to 57599. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock tomorrow. Answer Barry's call within 5 rings. Tell us the exact amount in euro and cents, and that money could be yours. So the amount again for tomorrow, €10,406.57. Entries cost €2.50 plus your standard message rate. You have to be over 18. You are playing across the Go Loud network of stations, and full terms are on newstalk.com.
The Football Show
on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch Premier League, Women's Super League, EFL, Scottish Premiership and much more. Live on Sky Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then.
What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it? Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Welcome along, Football Show. Dan McDonnell, Irish Independent. You're very welcome to the studio. Hello.
Hi Joe, how are you?
Cliched in the extreme to go for Lenin and decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happen and all that kind of thing. But 18 days ago, Roman Abramovich was watching Chelsea in a stadium in Abu Dhabi win the World Club Cup, and now his club is very much officially for sale. Get your orders in by Friday, by the way. It's like
I'm working on that, obviously. Like I thought about that quote earlier, actually, because I was trying to think what was the context where it was used last. I mean, you can take your pick of events in recent years. I presume it was thrown out a couple of times in the Super League debate. I seem to recall that in a football context being thrown out, but and obviously this, has a bit of everything, doesn't it? The current affairs whim and the current affairs angle, and the sort of but there's parallels in the pace at which the news cycle moves to the point where someone's position appears to become unsustainable, where maybe even a couple of days ago you might have thought, no, it won't come to that, or maybe people who were on the beat knew that it was going to come to that very quickly, but it seems to be a very sudden shift to getting out of there.
Well, I think it's fair to surmise that when he handed over the stewardship and care of the club, he was a touch panicked and was maybe hoping that might suffice for the time being. It was
a fudge. It was like one of those early holding statements, and maybe even some of the Super League stuff was like, that's not really gonna fly here.
Potentially. And there was also the peace talks business, which was an odd
I'm not involved in politics at all, but I might go in and solve that, actually.
So this afternoon in Westminster, Abramovich his name has been discussed at length at Westminster on various fronts. The Labour MP Chris Bryant has brought him up several times, and so today, this was in advance of the Abramovich statement that extended to the UK Labour Party leader Keir Starmer. So he addressed Boris Johnson on leaders' questions, and he was talking about Abramovich. Just have a listen.
Mr. Speaker, Roman Abramovich is the owner of Chelsea Football Club and various other high-value assets in the United Kingdom. He's a person of interest to the Home Office because of his links to the Russian state and his public association with corrupt activity and practices. Last week, the Prime Minister said that Abramovich is facing sanctions. He later corrected the record to say that he isn't. Well, why on earth isn't he?
Mr. Speaker, it's not appropriate for me to comment on individual cases at this stage. But what I can say, and I stand, Mr. Speaker, by what I've said in the House and what we've put on the record. But be in no doubt that the actions that we've already taken, that this House has already taken, are having an effect in Moscow. And by exposing the ownership of properties of companies in the way that we are, by sanctioning 275 individuals, already a further 100 last week, the impact is being felt.
So then the Abramovich statement lands this evening. I'll bring in Jonathan Wilson in just a moment, but I'm sure lots of you maybe haven't had a chance to see the statement, and it's very much Roman Abramovich in the first person. I would like to address the speculation in media over the past few days in relation to my ownership of Chelsea FC. As I've stated before, I've always taken decisions with the club's best interest at heart. In the current situation, I've therefore taken the decision to sell the club, as I believe this is in the best interest of the club, the fans, the employees, as well as the club sponsors and partners. The sale of the club will not be fast-tracked, but will follow due process. Then he says, I will not be asking for any loans to be repaid. Now we're talking here an estimated 1.5 billion. So he says, I will not be asking for any loans to be repaid. This has never been about business nor money for me, but about pure passion for the game and club. Moreover, I've instructed my team to set up a charitable foundation where all net proceeds from the sale will be donated. The foundation will be for the benefit of all victims of the war in Ukraine. This includes providing critical funds towards the urgent and immediate needs of victims, as well as supporting the long-term work of recovery. Please know that this has been an incredibly difficult decision to make, and it pains me to part with the club in this manner. However, I do believe this is in the best interest of the club. I hope I will be able to visit Stamford Bridge one last time to say goodbye to all of you in person. It's been the privilege of a lifetime to be part of Chelsea FC, and I'm proud of all our joint achievements. Chelsea Football Club and its supporters will always be in my heart. Thank you, Roman. End of statement.
I think you picked up earlier on the line on the victims of the war in Ukraine, the phrasing of that, which obviously would extend to
Russian soldiers.
I would have thought so.
Yeah,
I would have thought it's a carefully crafted statement. I'm not sure. I mean, it seems like obviously from Chelsea fans, I mean, you do understand this. I mean, that there's an outpouring of support or love from him, and I know. I mean, I know what the counterpoint to that is, but I do understand why some Chelsea fans will be responding in a sort of placing him on a pedestal type of way, just because of his era and where it propelled the club, and that's just the nature of fandom and where it goes. I'm not sure at the moment how people would feel about the optics of a Russian with pretty strong links to Putin and so on, being on a football pitch in London saying goodbye to the fans with sort of 40,000+ people cheering his name. I'm not sure he's going to get that in the short term future, I would have thought.
Yeah. The Labour MP who's really led the fight in this over the past week, Chris Bryant, gave his reaction. He said, this all feels like a desperate attempt to save face and save himself from being sanctioned. All he really needs to do is go on telly and say, Vladimir, take the Russian tanks back home, and do it now. Very happy to bring in Jonathan Wilson. Evening, Jonathan.
Evening, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Extraordinary developments. Obviously, he bought this club for 140 million. There's talk of 2 to 3 billion. Who knows? I wouldn't think he has much leverage right now. When he says he's written off the 1.5 billion of loans he's made to the club, and net proceeds will go to this newly founded foundation, I presume that 1.5 billion of loans being written off, that's not coming out of the net proceeds from this sale. Is that your reading of it? It would be mine.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I think it's a very vague statement.
Yeah.
So we're not even sure he's talking about that 1.5 billion. We assume it is, because what other loans have there been? So yeah, it's not entirely clear, but we assume the 1.5 billion. And then what does net proceeds mean? Does that mean he takes his 140 million back? Which, to be honest, if you're getting 3 billion for it, seems like, what's the point of giving up 140 million? You might as well give it all up. 140 million in 2003 obviously is worth a lot more today. So would he take that? I've got no idea what net proceeds means. And we've got no idea, obviously, the precise details of what this charitable foundation may be, or who, as you've just alluded to, exactly who he means by the victims. And I presume that at least has been left deliberately vague while things are worked out. So this statement, I think, confirms the suspicion a lot of us had on Saturday. I think that statement to me on Saturday about handing over control and stewardship of the club, stewardship and care of the club, that suggested to me it was a sort of a flare going up. I'm willing to sell, and then as that story developed, he's decided today to confirm that.
Well, if Saturday was a flare, the cynical version of what today is it could be an effort to prompt some kind of bidding war and get the best price. But then if he's not taking the money with him, maybe it's not. That's why this is a very difficult thing to read. What do you think his strategy is, his thinking here is? I mean, so Chris Bryant's saying, well, this is to evade sanctions. In what respect would holding on to Chelsea for the time being help him in that respect, I wonder?
I don't really know. I mean, I because if he's, I mean, again, it comes down to what this net proceeds means. But if he's essentially, giving up any income from that, any revenue from that, then what's the difference if he sells it or if it's somehow seized by the British government? Which I have to say is I know there's an optical difference and there's a moral difference, but I have to say I find the idea that the British government would seize a football club off somebody seems, I suppose a lot of this seems pretty far-fetched till it happens, but that would seem a very strange move. It's seizing a building of somebody. I think there'd be widespread support for that, but if Chelsea fans would understand that, I think be furious if suddenly their club is I don't know, effectively nationalised. That would seem a very, very odd thing and something entirely out of keeping with how Boris Johnson and this government has behaved. So I think essentially this is you can read it two ways. You can read it as totally at face value, that he wants to do the right thing and he wants to give this money to the victims in Ukraine, or you can see it a bit more cynically or somewhere in between, that it's a way of sort of trying to say to people, look, I'm actually one of the good guys here. Don't blame me for this, and please don't freeze all my other assets.
Is there any sense, Jonathan, of what the feeling at the club at Chelsea has been for the staff? Everyone who's in the hierarchy who's not Abramovich, and I appreciate he has a couple of his sort of connections high up there at various parts of the club. But is there any sense of what their feelings have been since Saturday, or even a sense of what was being briefed, or what the general sort of vibe coming out of the club was?
Not really. The only person who's spoken, as far as I'm aware, is Thomas Tuchel, who, for 3 or 4 questions was quite happy to try and deadball everything, and then obviously got a bit irritated that the questions kept being asked. But I could see that from both sides. I think journalists absolutely had the right to ask those questions, particularly if nobody else at the club is being put forward. But equally, I can see Tuchel thinking, well, come on, I've answered this 3 or 4 times already. How often are you going to ask this? Yeah. So I don't know. I thought that was one of those instances that happen in, if you go to press conferences, you see that kind of thing repeatedly. I didn't think his reaction was the big deal there. And he was, although I think he has a responsibility to answer those questions in his role as manager, he's taken the money from Abramovich. I also felt the club had put him in a slightly unfair position, which may be because they knew this was all going on behind the scenes, and they were using Tuchel to sort of try and deflect attention. But in terms of what Marina Granovskaya, she never speaks. We know she's there in the background. We know she's very well respected in football. Or Eugene Tenenbaum, who is Ukrainian. In terms of what they think, we don't know, but then we haven't known what they've thought for 19 years. So that's nothing particularly new.
It's quite hard to get a read on Abramovich for obvious reasons. So I think we're all well aware as to how various oligarchs came into their money, and there is outright hatred of them across Russia for obvious reasons. So there's that. And then there is, I suppose, Jonathan, the rather complicated business of maintaining a relationship with Vladimir Putin. And Putin changes over time, maybe you change over time. Putin invades another country. That puts you in a very precarious position. And so when he says lines like the foundation will be for the benefit of all the victims of the war in Ukraine, my instinct was to say, he's including Russian soldiers in that. So he's, sneakily working that in there. But then that may well be for more complicated reasons, as in, I don't know where his relationship with Putin is, or what he feels he has to, what kind of a distance he has to keep with Putin. There are all of these things going on, and I can't get a read on where Abramovich's moral compass is at the moment when it comes to what's happening.
Yeah, I think there's sort of 3 things there cropped up in what you said. So the first is, I don't actually have a problem with this idea of there's general victims in Ukraine, because from what we hear from Russian soldiers, that a lot of them don't really seem to have had a clue what was going on. A lot of them are very young. They are also victims in their own way. Yeah. So in terms of providing healthcare or looking after their families or whatever, I would not have an issue with that at all. And I think particularly if you are Russian, it would be a totally reasonable and logical gesture to give money to both sides. We not only don't know what his relationship with Putin is, we're barely allowed to talk about it, because every time he does mention even very, very loose terms that there might be a relationship or a link there, you get sued. So we've seen that with the Catherine Belton book, Putin's People. I've had problems. I say problems, that makes it sound like I'm being critical. I'm not. But every time you mention anything to do with why Abramovich may have bought Chelsea, the Guardian lawyers come down and say you can't say that because we're worried about getting sued for it. So he's been very protective of very, very, very keen to keep the details of whatever relationship, if there is one, secret. And then the third point is, as you say, politically he's in a very, very difficult position. It's the implication, I think, of today's statement is that he is not particularly pro this war, but equally I can get why he really wouldn't want to come out and say that. And I don't know if you saw, there's a piece in the Financial Times today talking about how the oligarchs, although they have great financial power, have essentially no political power. And it's almost as though they're going to Putin. Look, I had this fortune of $5 billion. I've lost $4 billion of it, and he's sort of saying, "Well, look, do you want to keep the other $1 billion, or I can take that off you as well?"
Yeah, right.
So I think I don't really know how this works, but that made me reconsider. I sort of just assume rich people have political power as well, but maybe in this case they don't.
Well, I wouldn't think Putin gives it up all that easily. And as to one last one on Chelsea, I suppose, Dan, unless you have anything else, but as for the sale itself, get your offers in by Friday, and yet he's saying this is not going to be a quick-fire sale. I mean, it feels pretty hasty to me, but regardless, it doesn't appear as if he has very much leverage right now. So in terms of haggling, I don't know where he's going to go. And then that brings us back to our original point. What is the point of haggling if ultimately this money is not going into his pocket anyway? So there's the negotiations over price, and I don't know, is his thinking I want to get the biggest amount for this charitable foundation? Who knows? But then there is the point of, in terms of interest, like, I don't know about you, Jonathan, if I had the cash, I wouldn't be thinking about handing over billions for an asset belonging to an oligarch right now. I just feel like that would be tricky territory to get into. I mean, it's hard to know what level of interest there will be. It does seem as if Hans-Jörg Weiss and Todd Bowley are genuinely interested, but I don't know beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the fact that it's going to this charitable foundation, whatever that means, that does slightly ease that issue of handing over £2 billion or £3 billion, whatever, to an oligarch, in that you're actually handing it to a charitable foundation. So I guess that does, as and when we know what that foundation is, that does sort of smooth that path slightly. I think there's other reasons to be slightly cautious about the value of Chelsea. Kevin Maguire, the football finance expert, he made the he valued the club in 2020 at £1.2 billion. So not 3 billion, but 1.2, which is a lot lower than the figures being talked about today. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's not relevant because he's writing off the debt, but I don't know if that was 1.2, assuming you then take on the debt, in which case it will be 2.7. You've also got the issue that Stamford Bridge is small for a club of Chelsea's stature. And there's not a huge amount you can do about that. I mean, that's been one of the recurring frustrations, I think, for Chelsea in the Abramovich period, that they haven't been able to redevelop the stadium. They don't even own the freehold on the pitch, which is a legacy of the Ken Bates time. They did have those very grand plans, which ended up shelving, which would have involved building over. So the problem with Stamford Bridge is it's hemmed in on both sides. On one side by a cemetery, on the other side by a railway line. But they had worked out a plan where you could build over the railway line at enormous cost. But it was still cheaper than trying to find another relatively central site in London, especially given as I understand it, you can't sell Stamford Bridge because the freeholders have insisted that football must be played on that pitch and it can't be turned into apartments. So that's if you're buying it purely for financial reasons, that's the reason why Chelsea maybe can't be developed as an asset in the way that, for instance, Manchester City have been, or the way that the Saudis hope that Newcastle will be.
The situation at Everton, they released a statement this evening as well. Everyone at Everton remains shocked and saddened by the appalling events unfolding in Ukraine. This tragic situation must end as soon as possible. Any further loss of life must be avoided. The players, coaching staff, everyone working at Everton is providing full support to our player Vitaly Mykolenko and his family, and will continue to do so. The club can confirm it has suspended with immediate effect all commercial sponsorship arrangements with the Russian companies USM, Megaphone and Yota. End of statement. So they're obviously all companies backed by Alisher Usmanov. This situation at Everton has never been very clear-cut to me, certainly. So Usmanov's name is very much associated with the club ever since he sold up to Kroenke at Arsenal, and yet he holds no formal position beyond that of being the major sponsor through these companies. So Mashiri is very much the man in possession, it seems. He was born in Iran, family moved to England, but he obviously is a business associate, I suppose, of Usmanov, is the broad umbrella to use. Between 2006 and 2013, he was chairman of Usmanov's mining company. He's chairman of USM Holdings, or certainly was. Usmanov and his assets, Usmanov hasn't been, obviously, but his assets have been frozen by the EU. So presumably that's the reason why the sponsorship has been put on hold, if all his assets are frozen. This doesn't seem like a philosophical move on Everton's part, Jonathan. But again, it goes to the heart of how complicated the infrastructure around all of these people is, like in terms of who owns what and how clear-cut it is. The Everton situation doesn't feel very clear-cut at all. Like Frank Lampard was having to deny that Usmanov was on the interview panel for when he got the job not so long ago. So your thoughts on what the Everton situation is?
Well, it's working out exactly what Usmanov's position is incredibly difficult. He clearly was funding the club at least £30 million a year. If you look at I think the last accounts that we have is for 2019-20, and they took in 63 and a bit million pounds in sponsorship, and we know that at least half of that came from Usmanov. Now, I'm not sure why he would do that, because to be honest, until today, I hadn't heard of USM, I hadn't heard of Megaphone, and I hadn't heard of Yota. So the fact that they're sponsoring the training ground and the women's team, and they've got, they had first refusal on naming rights for the new stadium, maybe other people are very well aware of these companies, but I don't think he's getting great market penetration for that £30+ million a year. So why is he funding it? And maybe it's a business favour to somebody who, as you say, was chairman of one of his companies, has shares in two others. But yeah, that situation was all pretty murky. I think there's another consideration here, which is, say one of your owners, say one of your shareholders is sanctioned, what then happens to the club? What happens to the club's assets? Do they get frozen immediately? How do the banks react to that? And that is something I don't really understand at all. I've been trying to find that out today. And it appears to be the case that the banks will be very, very cautious, because people within the banks conceivably could have personal liability for that if they allowed a sanctioned person to deal through them. So I presume Everton's action is to prevent any issue initially with the banks. But I thought it was interesting, the statement they put out immediately made reference to the new stadium, which is being built at the cost of £500 million. I'm not really sure where that money's coming from. It's not coming from Usmanov. He clearly was involved in funding of that. So they've got to somehow find I know Mashiri said that he's covered all costs so far, but I think the implication was that Usmanov would contribute further down the line. So they've got to somehow find the funding for that, and that may not be easy. And if that project stalls, then Everton's suddenly in a really difficult position. And also, Everton's spending recently has been pretty terrible. I think they've got the 6th highest wage bill in the Premier League at the minute. And there they are, 4th from bottom. And they've got a load of older players drawing high salaries who they probably could do with getting rid of. And the pandemic means that they're all just sort of sitting there bloating the squad.
Like, do we think, Jonathan, or like Joe, I don't know if you have a view, like, do we think this is like a significant moment in recent football history where people debate, sports washing, people debate that sort of broader issues of who owns clubs, and yet we have a situation where maybe an event in current affairs has had this domino effect in a short space of time? Different cases, but there's sort of, it's all stemming from the same place. Like, is this a moment that actually we'll look back on as meaningful, or is it going to pass? This is I've seen that debate has been raised by people. Will other ownership, or will clubs be more careful about their ownership decisions in future or not?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I suspect in the short term, at least, this will bring home to people how dangerous it is to have an outside agency with no particular connection to the locality, whose aims are not just winning trophies or playing great football. Have your whole club being in hock to that sort of outside agency. But fundamentally, I think, for instance, Newcastle fans will think, well, we haven't beaten in 7 games, we're not going to get relegated now, whereas before Saudi Arabia took over, we were getting relegated. And similarly, Manchester City will think back to the time before Sheikh Mansour and say, well, this is clearly better. We've won 3 out of the last 4 league titles. So I think football fans tend to be quite short-term in their thinking and tend to be quite self-interested. Yeah. What I think is, it also depends exactly what happens with the takeover of Chelsea, who takes over, how much they invest. But potentially what we're seeing is one of the 3 biggest players in the Premier League being neutered and becoming just another club. And then it comes down to just Manchester City or Liverpool, and Liverpool operating on a much smaller budget, in which case we could be moving in the Premier League pretty quickly to a situation like France or like Italy, like Germany, where one club dominates all the time.
I think it's a very interesting question, Dan. I've been trying to think about it. I think the answer is complicated. For a start, fans don't care. I think the Newcastle situation has demonstrated that in glaring terms.
No, of course, we're aware of that.
So it's more about if the Premier League will suddenly change tact. If we take the Premier League for a moment, I mean, what strikes me about Chelsea and Everton is they are such specific situations in that the world at large, every Western country had embraced Russian money, and there was money to be made and benefits to be had, and Moscow on Thames and all of this stuff was running rife, and that has happened over the last 20 to 30 years, obviously in a huge way, in an increasing way. And then suddenly Putin becomes toxic overnight, and any association with him has to be revoked instantly. And so that takes care of the Russian cohort for now, for a moment. As for the other areas where you would have concerns, I suppose then you're talking about states who are sports washing, or who, like, I guess with Saudi Arabia, with the PIF, it's not just sports washing, it's trying to prepare for a world post oil and to have all these assets all around the world. And this, I don't think so, because the Saudi takeover was as glaring example as you could hope for. They were coming in with huge controversy, with so many important people in British public life and political life questioning the decision, and they still ploughed on right ahead. And so it might depend on how long this war goes. It might depend on the extent to which the issue of rogue states embedding themselves in Western life becomes a real topic. But my sense would be, as Jonathan says, in the short term, a little bit, but I don't see a great change. I don't see it as a watershed moment, to be honest, at all.
Yeah, because we were sat here last week, wasn't it, talking about, it's, as you said, it's a sort of weeks where decades happen and so on, but it was about the Gazprom UEFA sponsorship was a sort of a talking point at that stage. And obviously UEFA's finances are tied in with Super League and the broader picture there in the last period of time. And if you take Russian money out of the equation in European football, that has a domino effect, but it doesn't really change people's morals, really. It just removes one partner out of it, and then other people step into the space.
Well, I'm sure the Chinese will come on in and sorry about the Uyghurs, Muslims, and the genocide which is happening there. Would you back UEFA to turn down huge Chinese state money for sponsorship of the Champions League?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, see, I don't think I would either, Jonathan. And Jonathan, that's, what this is trying to spotlight on is something people were talking about anyway, which is the very, very nice soft power that football affords to states or individuals is very much up for sale. I think that continues. Obviously, Russian money's no good right now, but Saudi money's pretty good, Chinese money's pretty good, you name it.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is telling is that there's all this, quite rightly, there's all this horror about what Russia's done. Nobody seems particularly horrified by Saudi attacks in Yemen, and yet PIF have a much closer relationship to the Saudi state, and therefore to those atrocities than Abramovich does to Russia.
Yeah, 100%.
To Putin.
Yeah.
However close that relationship is, which we don't know, and as I say, he has been very litigious in saying there is no relationship. Mm-hmm. It's more indirect than PIF and the Saudi state.
Yeah.
And yet we don't seem concerned by that. Now,
well, lots of us do, but clearly the powers that be don't, which is the interesting thing.
Well, lots of us do, but still, I think generally there's more outrage and more outcry about Ukraine, and that's I know there's been some debate about that, about why that should be. I mean, I think it's natural just because it's closer to home. It's just geographically nearer, and we can see the implications for states not really very far from us. Of course, it feels more immediate. Plus the fact that it's a country that borders NATO countries makes it a much more direct concern.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual the way the war is being conducted, I'm not really sure there's a huge amount of difference there.
Oh. So in short, I think we're saying football unlikely to have some kind of watershed moment, Dan. I think you'd probably agree with that.
Oh yeah, I don't believe that would be the case. But it's interesting that people in these cases this week, Abramovich is sort of getting out of Dodge effectively. And I was interested, Jonathan raised that point about where the British state going to seize it. You thought that was unthinkable, but you're sort of wondering then, well, are the Premier League suddenly going to get involved in this instance? And do they lay down do they make some kind of decision that sets precedents that is floated? And I know the football debate is full of whataboutery, but in this instance it's very relevant.
Yeah.
Whataboutery, the points that Jonathan raised there. And I think the Premier League, once it portrays itself as some kind of moral guardian in a situation, leaves itself in a very very vulnerable to very valid claims of hypocrisy.
But the other problem there is the legal side of things, which I know is what FIFA and UEFA have been very concerned about in terms of expelling Russia from the World Cup and Russian clubs from European competition. That for people I've heard from suggest that if this were to go to CAS, the decision will be overturned. Mm-hmm. And so I completely. I sort of. FIFA clearly has not conducted itself particularly well vis-a-vis authoritarian popular states. That much is clearly true. However, I understand its reluctance to expel countries and expel teams for non-footballing reasons, because really that shouldn't be its jurisdiction. FIFA or UEFA shouldn't be the arbiter of how bad a war is. Is it bad enough to take action? That really should be coming from national governments and from the UN. And that's why this is, from FIFA's point of view and UEFA's point of view, this is why this is different from the Yugoslav wars in the early 90s, where there were UN sanctions, and so FIFA could quite easily defer to that. Here, they wait for the IOC to take action, then got in line behind the IOC. But I think they were very concerned by the possibility of saying to Russia, no, you can't go to Qatar, and then finding themselves being sued by the Russian state. And that actually, I think, then raises existential concerns for the future of FIFA. Because what would have happened, or what happens if CAS say, no, you've got to let them play? Even if it's let them play pending an appeal, which is what happened with Manchester City. Obviously very, very different circumstances, but while they appealed, they were allowed to carry on playing in the Champions League. So what happens then if Sweden says, no, we're not going to play them, Poland says, no, we're not going to play them, Czech Republic say, no, we're not going to play them, and then every other European team goes, well, we're not going to get involved, no, we're not playing the World Cup if they're there. So suddenly you have the law and CAS saying they have to play, and all of UEFA say, well, we're not playing. You then don't have a World Cup, and you don't have FIFA, and then who runs football?
Jonathan, thanks so much. Great to have you on. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, thank you.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Jonathan Wilson there, chatting to us about, complicated picture to say the least. We're going to take a very short break. We've gone slightly over time, and then more from Dan McDonnell in just a moment.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Get more of the sports you love on Sports Extra with BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Hello. Hello.
So far on News Talk's Cash Machine,
13,128 and 59 cents.
we've given away over €500,000.
21,456 cents.
That's right.
36,753 euros.
Over €500,000.
It's the right answer. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Barry.
And now it's your chance to win.
Paddy, congratulations.
Stay tuned to find out how you can enter.
We are so delighted for you.
News Talk's Cash Machine.
Thanks so much.
You made my day.
Calling stakeholders in the €20 billion Irish construction industry. The National Construction Summit will take place live and in person on the 3rd of March at the Sport Island campus, Blanchardstown, Dublin. Hear from speakers on Housing for Ireland, Climate Action Plan, Modular and Offsite, Design and Planning, Procurement, Data Centre Infrastructure, Health and Safety, BIM, Engineering, Smart and Green Building, and Careers in Construction. Over 3,000 visitors, 150 exhibitors, 120 speakers. Register free at nationalconstructionsummit.ie.
First you go change your world, then you go change the world. At Maynooth University, you can align your vision for the world within a diverse campus amongst global knowledge leaders who can connect you with international careers. Discover over 100 masters from the digital world and work to sustainability, society and the environment. Visit our virtual postgraduate open day on March 8th. Register now at maynoothuniversity.ie. Maynooth University, know no bounds.
Get away and enjoy every moment of your St. Patrick's weekend. Whether you're wandering down craggy coast roads, taking a leisurely train trip for an extra long weekend of pampering in one of the country's best relaxation destinations, or letting loose on a buzzy city break full of local food and fun, Ireland is full of possibilities. So get the gang together, get planning, and keep discovering this St. Patrick's long weekend. Visit discoverireland.ie. Brought to you by Fáilte Ireland.
News Talk already gives you your daily fix of news and entertainment. But wouldn't you like a little bit more? More? News Talk Extra is everything you might have missed. Plus, expert tips, podcasts and competitions. All straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at newstalk.com/extra. Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Watch every single live Premier League game on Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
Welcome back, Football Show. Joe Malloy, Dan McDonnell with you this evening. It's brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Latest in the FA Cup, Luton Town 2, Chelsea 3. Dan. No keeping them down. Southampton 3, West Ham 1. And then Liverpool are 2-0 up at home to Norwich with 68 minutes on the clock. Celtic have beaten St Mirren 2-0 tonight in the Scottish Premiership. Rangers have beaten St Johnstone by 1-0. Something I wanted to get your thoughts on. So Jonathan mentioned Thomas Tuchel there. Losing his temper after several minutes in the press conference, saying, guys, what more do you want me to say? And Frank Lampard having to answer questions as well about was Usmanov in his job interview and pointing out that the I suppose, tribute of sort at the weekend at Goodison was from, the club as a whole, not just me. So the club, feels a certain way about the situation in Ukraine. The former Norwich manager, Daniel Farke, has left his role as manager of Krasnodar in the Russian Premier League. He only joined in January. He hadn't even taken charge of a match. Now, his statement is less of a stance than the second manager I'll come to in a second. He said the current political development and the associated request from our children, wives, families and friends to come home and the loss of all sporting perspectives have led to this well-considered decision. So there's a degree there of, I'm getting home, getting out of here. His German countryman, Markus Gisdol, he has resigned from Lokomotiv Moscow. He only took the job in October. Being a football coach is the best job in the world, but I can't do that in a country whose leader has invaded another country in the middle of Europe. That does not go together with my values, and I've therefore resigned as manager of Lokomotiv Moscow with immediate effect. People wondering, should Thomas Tuchel make a stand? Should Frank Lampard make a stand? It seems like a huge ask of them, I would feel instinctively.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Tuchel's comments have been that unimpressive. I mean, like last week, I thought he managed to sort of stay on the right side, and indicating he felt a degree of discomfort around things, So he hasn't come out there and sort of played the old, it's nothing to do with me, I'm just a footballer, I'm not a politician, or all this stuff. Like he actually has embraced that, and I've been in those type of press conferences where someone they have a threshold of politeness with it, and then eventually it snaps because they've probably been thinking in their head all morning what are they going to say, and they have a certain amount of things they want to say, but then they don't want to be repeating them after like 4 answers or 3-4 answers or whatever. It's coming back to our previous point about the whataboutery that goes with it. It's like someone working in Russia is very black and white. I'm working in Russia at the moment. I'm earning my money in the country. I think very favourable tax rates in the country, for people in the football sphere. You're very much open to direct questioning as to why are you staying there.
Yeah.
It is more layered in the case of Tuchel and Lampard, and it would be unbelievably powerful if someone did take some kind of stand based on that, but I just not sure if it was ever realistic to expect that, and I actually think Tuchel, to be fair, has played it reasonably well in the circumstances. I don't think he's come across in that tone-deaf way that sometimes people in football can, and no doubt others might have in the same situation. I sort of think he's been okay with it. The Lampard one, I mean, the connection isn't as direct for him, so I'd give him a little bit of leeway around it. Whether, again, you're coming into the details, it just feels we've been through these stories in football before, where like, the news cycle trains in on a particular issue, and then the momentum with that just becomes powerful, and it forgets a lot of other things in its wake. Like I opened Live Score to check the latest scores, and they say in solidarity with Ukraine we're not carrying the scores from the Russian Football League, but I mean there's a lot of leagues you can find scores from that, so there is an element to that, but I'm also conscious of like pressing all the whataboutery buttons and becoming over the top with that, and that's even diminished the seriousness of this and why it's so felt, and the implications of it are quite serious in terms of how it can escalate. So people are sort of very strong about taking a stand, thinking this will have some force for good in the short term. Maybe Daniel Farke and these other managers think maybe this will trigger a reaction from other sports people. I don't know.
We'll park all that for the time being. Let's talk about the League of Ireland then. You were at the Shells game on Monday.
I was.
Do you only go to Damien Duff games now?
No, that's not true.
Are you like the Damien Duff correspondent of the Irish Independent?
No, I'm not.
I just feel like you're following him around.
I wasn't at their game with Drogheda last week. I was in Derry, Joe. I was up in the other end of the country watching Derry and Shamrock Rovers, doing some work up there.
Reluctantly left
Not
Duff.
Reluctantly, no.
Did Duff have a game that day?
He did. They won in Drogheda. 2-0. Okay. I was not present for that.
Wow. Yeah. So how was Monday then? The sprinkler got a lot of coverage.
Yeah, I mean, you'd wish that wasn't the case, obviously, and I think maybe if the game had more incident in it, it mightn't have been that much of a talking point, but it was a 0-0 draw, and the sprinklers went off some fault of some description. Like, I don't think someone actually put them on. Like, it was just, they went off, they were triggered for some reason.
For how long?
And there's an 8-minute delay in the second half. So like some fella brings out Tony Sheridan, he brings out a wheelbarrow. But then there was this moment where he puts the wheelbarrow over the sprinkler, because it was the same offending one that was just going round and spraying people. Players had to come off the pitch. But just as he put the wheelbarrow on this one, another one went off further down the line, and the crowd was laughing at this stage. So it wasn't people going, this is a disgrace. It was more a case of, listen, this happens. And I hate the whole, I'm not a big fan of the whole greatest league in the world sort of shtick. I've never been mad on that, because stupid stuff happens in all leagues. It's just, obviously there's a real spotlight on it sometimes when it happens in the league here, and some people think it's quite endearing in a way. I'm sort of in between the two. I mean, it shouldn't happen, but it shouldn't be the subject of a great post-mortem either.
No, I wouldn't think so. So Jack Byrne scored and beautifully assisted this week, and we played an interview with him last night. And he's just obviously delighted to be back playing. It's so good to have him back in the league. Selfishly for Irish football, it's good. So you suspect Rovers are going to be Rovers again this year. What are the early signs as to who's going to challenge them?
Well, I think Derry last week, that was probably significant. As much as sometimes you have these double headers and you focus on the Monday games and go, Jack Byrne was amazing on Monday, Rovers scored some nice goals, you think they're going to be dominant. Yet the reality is, 3 days earlier they did lose away to a team that could turn out to be one of their main title rivals. I mean, Derry City, I was up there sort of working on a piece around the fact that their owner, Philip O'Doherty, he became a billionaire last September.
How much money has been put into Derry?
Well, it's more a case of, they would tell you there. I mean, I spoke to Philip Doherty for a piece, and it's coming out later in the week. But I mean, they would say that they've not like suddenly inflated their wage bill in a dramatic way, but what they are doing suddenly in a league where people talk about 1-year contracts, like their manager Rory Higgins, who was on the Ireland staff till last year, 4-year deal. Ronan Boyce, one of their better young players, 4-year deal. Michael Duffy, back from Dundalk, 4-year deal. Patrick McElhenney, 3-year deal. Jamie McGonigal, who scored an amazing goal in injury time last week, 3-year deal. So all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, these aren't going away anywhere too soon. Like, they're not sort of putting all their eggs in the basket for 1 year. And the fact is, they do have a local who was putting money into the club since 2009 anyway, but sold his company last year to go from a millionaire, which he already was. To be fair, it wasn't like he was sort of owning a corner shop and he sold this, it went big. Like, he was already very successful and bankrolling the club effectively, but he's now a billionaire.
What age is he?
He's 61. Okay. Yeah. So hugely successful, and went out to get Higgins, and they've brought a lot of the Derry lads back who were winning trophies elsewhere around the country, which is a real bugbear for people in Derry, that they couldn't keep these players, and now they're all home. And
so they're building something very.
It was great, yeah. And may not be this year that they challenge, but they're going to be around for a while, and it's definitely something that's significant to watch it all play out. So Shamrock Rovers did lose to Derry. I mean, they've beaten UCD and drawn at home, so they're probably, to be fair, 2 fixtures at home they'd be expected to win.
Yes.
They had a tough game up in, Jack Byrne did give away a penalty in that game in Derry, very unusually, and they conceded an injury time goal, where last year they scored a lot of injury time winners. So people are hoping, does this, that they play St Patrick's Athletic on Friday, tough enough game, will they turn it on there?
And is there anything to suggest in terms of, I don't know, loss of personnel or otherwise, that Rovers have gone backwards since?
No, I mean, the thing is, they haven't really lost any personnel at all, and they've brought in Jack Byrne on the lines. But the thing is, by keeping all the players they have happy, like Graham Burke is an Ireland international. He's been on the bench for the last 2 games. Even when he scored his goal against Drogheda on Monday, he came off the bench. He gave a little bit of some kind of celebration afterwards, which gave the impression he wasn't too happy to be a sub. So this is more of the issue that they have.
What does that celebration look like?
Well, it's sort of turning around vaguely in the direction of the sideline and making some hand movement that suggests that he should be on the pitch. Now, you could interpret it, but then you saw Ronan Flynn, one of the captain, sort of having a little word with him in the celebrations to say something to him. Now, maybe someone in the crowd said something that he was responding to. It's very possible. But it's more the personality, the keeping the personalities happy, which is still a good problem to have, but we're looking for debate and something to discuss. And if it's not going to be squad strength, it's going to stop them. So people are looking at squad happiness as maybe some potential chink in the armour.
Did I see as well, sorry to put you on the spot, I meant to check this with you and didn't get a chance to. Did I see the FAI have sold a whole ton of season tickets for the year ahead?
Yeah, it's I think it's, they say record season tickets, but I'm not sure. They didn't always have a season ticket style package, but certainly in the context of recent years, this is very good.
Yeah.
You know, the take up is across 17,000 towards 20. The significance of it for me is that the league doesn't have a defined marquee fixture. You've Nations League games against Ukraine. We will see what happens with that. Armenia and Scotland. No big World Cup qualifiers or glamour friendlies or Ronaldo's coming to town.
Yes.
Or all these reasons that were maybe pointed to in the autumn for the buzz around games. It does suggest an appetite to go and watch this team.
Okay, very good. The football show is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Back in 1 second.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Get more of the sports you love on Sports Extra with BT Sport and Premier Sports. At